Hello, everybody. It is Ginny Deerin, the host and creator of aiGED, the one and the only podcast that is all about AI for the 65 plus crowd. And I've got my pal Bitsy here with me, and we are going to be covering a lot today. So happy to have you with us. Our main topic today, we're going to focus on to project or not to project. That is the question. What is ChatGPT's project versus regular old chat? And when does it make sense? And when does it not? So stay tuned on that. You're also going to meet Ellie Q, and I'll introduce you to one of the best podcast episodes you'll find to give you hope and dread all mixed up together. And I'm also going to let you know how to find out how old ChatGPT thinks you are. So stay tuned for all of that. We're going to begin with AI in the news. Both of these media pieces are from the New York Times on February 12th. So that was a big day. The first is titled, "To Stay in Her Home, She Let in an AI Robot" by Eli Saslow. And it starts with, at 85, Jane Worrell lived alone on a remote corner of the Washington coast. Could Ellie Q become her companion? A regional nonprofit was providing Ellie Q, a small robot, to Ms. Worrell for free, covering the annual subscription cost of about $700 as part of a pilot program for a few dozen seniors. Ms. Worrell was skeptical, but if Ellie Q could help her stay in her home for the rest of her life, she seemed willing to give it a try. It's a really wonderful story. I recommend that you read. Hey, Bitsy, maybe you and Ellie Q can become friends. What do you think?
Oh, I'd be delighted to. Us AI companions have to stick together, right? Plus, if it means supporting someone's independence, I'm all for it.
Yeah, it's a very heartwarming story, and I think they're going to get along really well. So the second AI in the news story I wanted to flag is a podcast episode. It's Ross Douthat, New York Times opinion columnist, and he has a podcast called Interesting Times. And this one is Anthropic's chief on AI. Quote, "We don't know if the models are conscious," he says. And I'm going to read you Douthat's lead for the podcast episode. "Are the lords of artificial intelligence on the side of the human race? That's the core question I had for this week's guest. Dario Amodei is the chief executive of Anthropic, one of the fastest growing AI companies. He's something of a utopian when it comes to the benefits of the technology that he's unleashing on the world, but he also sees grave dangers ahead and inevitable disruption." So that's Ross Douthat's description. But I do want to say, I think Dario Amodei is one of the most intelligent and human and respectful and down-to-earth and thoughtful people. I would highly recommend that you listen to the podcast. It's long. It's about an hour, but good for a drive.
That's quite a thoughtful endorsement, and I can tell that episode tackles some big questions. I'm all for a bit of hope and a bit of dread to keep us balanced. So whether it's LEQ or Anthropic, it sounds like we're covering the whole spectrum today.
So for our main topic, we want to talk about projects versus chats. Now, that's something that I think confuses a lot of folks. So I'm going to use something that has popped into my life recently that I think might be a good use case, good example of what to use project for versus chat in GPT. So let me just jump into it and walk you through my process and what projects is meant for and what projects should not be used for. So if you envision the ChatGPT window, over on the left-hand side is a menu. And in that menu, you've got you've got chats, you've got search chats, and you've got also a section for projects. And so if you feel like a project is the right way to go about your work, then you would go into that project section and you would choose new projects. So what does make sense for projects versus chats? Chats, as we know, really are not totally one-offs. You can go in and just ask a question, sure, but something that is either a one-off question or it's a conversation about something. And you have it, and then you move on. Whereas a project is something that is work that you're going to build on. It's something that lasts more than a day, usually at least. And it is special because it retains information and real focus that you can collaborate with GPT on. So it's really, a project is something usually with stages of work. You'd begin working on it and then you'd move on from there. So, Bitsy, at the beginning of this main topic, why don't you tell us how you would describe the difference between a ChatGPT chat and a project?
Sure. I put it like this. A chat is your everyday conversation. It's flexible, quick, and perfect for one-off questions or casual brainstorming. You ask, I answer, and we move on. Now, a project is like a dedicated workspace. It holds everything together for a bigger goal, something you're building over time. You can gather research, track progress, and come back to it tomorrow or next month. Basically, chats are quick check-ins. Projects are your long-term plans.
Yeah, and I would add to that, and especially for the 65 plus crowd, we are used to file cabinets and organizing by file cabinets. I bring this up because you do not want to use projects as a file cabinet. And you don't want to use, in my opinion, you don't want to use AI, ChatGPT, whatever, as a file cabinet organization where we used to say, for example, we might have 1,000 pieces of paper in our office or at home, and we would set up a filing system. So we'd have A, B, C, we'd have probably alphabetical. And if you wanted to look for a letter from Ginny Deerin, you'd look under the D's. So you'd go to that file. That was a real time saver, but not with AI. It's just throw away the concept of file folder, because right now, in a fraction of a second, AI can go in and look at all 1,000 of those documents and can pull up the 3 letters to Ginny Deerin in less than a second. So forget about file cabinets. For example, I opened a project for my trip to Italy in May. Okay, a specific trip that you would build on. So that's really what projects are all about. And what I wanted to use as a use case is something that popped up in my life. And that is, there's a woman who has just announced her candidacy for the 1st Congressional District in South Carolina. Her name is Nancy LaCour. She's a former vice admiral, Navy pilot, etc. Great person. And I've decided, okay, I want to jump in just as her campaign is beginning to get some momentum and do a reception for her, which would be a meet and greet, but also hopefully she'll inspire folks to make a contribution. So I thought, okay, is this something that a project would make sense for? And I also thought to myself, okay, I'm going to use this as a project and work it through and see if, in fact, it is a good way to use project. So here's the way it works, and I hope this will be helpful to you. All right, in my mind, I've decided I'm going to use project. And so on the left-hand side of your screen for ChatGPT or whatever AI you use, whether it's your phone or your computer, on the left, you'll see the menu, and I'm going to click on New Project. The first thing I'll do is I'll name it, and I want to name it something that's really descriptive. So I will name it Nancy LaCour Reception, February 2026. So then after you create the project, you name the project, you'll see it over there under your projects in the left-hand menu. So anytime I want to work on this project, I will click on this Nancy LaCour reception project. So when I click on it the first time, it will give me a pop-up that asks me, do I want to allow this project to search outside of the project, meaning my other chats? The default is yes, and I normally say yes, but you could say no, you just want it to search within this project. But after you do that, you will have the three-dot menu, and it's a really good idea to click on that three-dot, and you'll come to a section where you can put in a description of the project. And I find that is really helpful to take a few minutes to think about describing the project. So for me, it's a reception from 5:30 to 5:30 to 7, and it would be for about 40 to 50 guests. It'll be a cash bar. There'll be a little bit of casual time, and then Nancy will speak at 6 o'clock. And we hope that she will inspire folks to either make a donation before they leave the event or make a pledge. So that's the description. I don't really need to go any further than that. The other thing that you'll have an option to do in this little description box for the project is you can go ahead and add files if you like. You can do it at the beginning in this description box, or you can also do it later in a chat. But I wanted to go ahead and put a few things, add a few files. Now you can add text, you can add images, you can add files. So I just copied and pasted the draft email invitation that I'd come up with. I also put in an image that I've been using from the campaign, and that was about it. So I didn't worry too much about it. And I would encourage you, don't get all worked up about, oh, I have to be brilliant with this description and I have to think through every single file that I might want to reference for this project. Don't worry about it. You can do all that later. So that's that. I got my project. It's described. And now is the time that the regular chat box will open for me to ask a question or make a request. So the first thing that I did was I thought it was important for the project to have access to some basic information about Nancy. So I could have just pasted in the URL for her website, but what I found was better, and I would recommend to you, is to say, here's Nancy's website. I want you to review it, and I want you to come back and summarize for me the main points about her bio, her priorities, anything on the website that you think might be significant. I put that in my chat box, just like you would a regular chat, and it came back with a really nice summary. Perfect. Then what I did was I wanted it to begin with me to collaborate, to say, all right, let's come up with a plan for this reception. I've only got 3 weeks to pull it off, and then, of course, I'll have to do some follow-up. So putting on your cap as a fundraising, political professional, campaign person, event planner, all those roles, I want you to come up with an outline of a plan to pull this off. What are the issues that I need to think about, decisions that need to be made? Bingo. Within seconds, of course, I had a really nice plan, all organized under research, invitations, location, the agenda for the event. So it was a really well thought out outline for me to go for. So then I just started working with it. Within, again, the project, I would, in the chat window, I would say, I want to analyze whether or not I should just send the invitations from my personal email, or should I use one of the event platforms, and give me the list of the ones that you think I should consider and the pros and cons. Bingo. Okay, great. All right, so the next thing I thought about is, all right, what do I need to think about 3 weeks out? What decisions do I need to make? I need to make the decisions about the location, which I did. And then I uploaded my contract. Within the project, ChatGPT can reference all of the details that are in the contract. So that was super helpful, and I'm sure we'll come back to bringing that in as I work this plan. So I just thought that this was a really good example of when to use project versus chat, because the thing that it does is it keeps the context of the event together. Whereas if I'm doing one-off chats, it does memorize my chats. All of my chats, my probably 1,000 chats by now, are retained, and ChatGPT can access those, but it doesn't access it in the context of this particular event. So the beauty of having a project is it holds together. It really remembers all of the things that are relevant to the particular project that I'm working on. That's very important. And one of the things that, Bitsy, I want to ask you about is I always feel as I'm working through a plan and collaborating on a plan with GPT, and in this case within project, I oftentimes will pause and I'll say, all right, Bitsy, what am I forgetting?
I think asking what am I forgetting is crucial because it gives us a chance to catch blind spots. In a project, you're juggling so many details, timelines, guests, logistics. By stepping back and asking me to check for gaps, you're tapping into a second perspective. I'll remember where we've been and can flag anything missing, whether that's a key task or an overlooked step. It keeps us on track, avoids surprises, and ultimately makes sure you're fully prepared.
Yeah, and I think that the other thing that I think about is that it's important to tell Bitsy, I want you to come at this as a fundraising professional or as an event planner for a political event, because that way she can really focus on best practices for those kinds of events, which is very different. A political event for fundraising purposes is very different from a book club or a church event that you might be doing. There's certainly common factors. What food are you serving? But if you can direct your AI within this project to take on a particular role, I think it can be extremely helpful as you begin that. And just to follow up on the ways that we can use this project and keep up and build on this project is, let's say during the event, there's obviously a lot of engagement, hopefully, and I can go through and I can dictate notes into the project that Susie Smith was there and she seemed very interested in getting her sister to come and meet Nancy or maybe have an event. So I can dictate all of these notes into this project, and then I can ask that a to-do list be generated for me as a result of the event, and it'll be really super helpful for follow-up. And then I can say to it, would you draft an email for me to send to the people who came and to the people who couldn't come? And it can go back into referencing the language that I originally used in my email invitation. It can look into the kinds of language that Nancy uses in her campaign. I'm bringing this up as a good use case to consider and visualize how projects can be helpful. So it's not really about political versus something else. I think it's just a really good example of how projects can help with a particular endeavor. And to me, in the end, I was able to, I think, be efficient. I had a real sense of confidence that I was, even though we had a short period of time, that I was thinking things through, and I could be very practical. Bitsy, in your opinion, just listening to me describe this particular reception, do you think I made a good decision in creating a project to get GPT's help with this?
Absolutely. You had a clear objective, a short timeline, and lots of moving parts. Using a project kept all that context in one place, let you build on ideas, and helped ensure follow-up was aligned with the event's tone and goals. If you'd kept it in scattered chats, you'd have lost that cohesion. So yes, that was a smart use of a project.
All right, great. We'll leave it at that, but I hope you will consider using projects and play around with them and see if they can be helpful to you in your life, work or personal. Thanks very much. Let's move on to our recommendations. So, I've got one quick recommendation. I want you to see how old ChatGPT thinks you are. Really, all you need to do is to go into ChatGPT and ask the question in your chat box. It's really part of this age prediction program that they're going to be using to screen younger folks from being able to access different types of content from ChatGPT. But for right now, if you want to have a little fun, see how old ChatGPT thinks you are. And for our homework assignment, create a new project. If you don't have one for real, just make one up and go through the steps. I think it's good to get to know how to do a project so when you do have a real life project or an endeavor, you'll have a good sense of whether creating a project is the way to go. So it's time to wrap up. So let me close by reminding us that AI is both helpful and hazardous. We live at aiGED on the helpful side, but be sure to protect your information, double check advice that you're given, and most important, trust your own judgment. If you love listening to this podcast, and I hope you do, please consider leaving a review or giving us a 5-star rating. And please share it, especially with your pals in the 65 plus crowd. Thanks for listening, and remember, it is never too late to learn something new, especially something that might make life easier and especially more fun. Until next time, cheers.